Hi, I'm Gav.
And I'm Will. We like hanging out in our sheds, making things, coming up with crazy ideas. The crazier, the better. The phrase, "that's so crazy, it might just work," pretty much sums up who we are and what we like to do.
Not everything we make is successful. We make a lot of stuff up too. But occasionally, just occasionally, we come up with something that actually does work, something new and exciting. And we're here today to share with you some of the highs and lows that we've experienced in the last 5 years as we've built something that we like to call the Voxiebox.
Now, in the year 1977, George Lucas released Star Wars. It featured an iconic scene in which a hologram of Princess Leia was beamed into thin air. "Help me, Obi-Wan, you're my only hope," she cried. Yet 36 years later, that sort of technology is still not available. So, about 5 years ago, after a few beers in the shed, Gav and I had a conversation that went something like this.
Hey Will, what do you think we should make next?
Well, how about we make a robot with a holographic projector for a head?
Well, holographic projectors, they don't exist yet, Will.
Exactly, so let's build one.
Yeah, okay.
So, we weren't serious, we were totally joking, but the seeds of creativity had been planted. We thought, hang on a second, this might actually be possible. If we're able to project pixels of light onto a moving surface through persistence of vision, we might actually be able to see some sort of floating shape.
So we started with a simple experiment. We got a laser pointer and we waggled it up and down on a piece of card like this and we flashed the laser. What we saw were tiny little points of light that appeared to hover in thin air.
That was our first glimpse of something called a voxel, a volumetric pixel. One voxel was a good start, but we wanted more. So we glued a mobile phone to the exposed piston of my granddad's lawnmower. We attached a drill to the drive shaft and cranked it up. The phone shook violently up and down. And just before the tape gave up, we saw this tiny cube of smoky light. We were onto something.
Although primitive, that cube of light was technically our first volumetric display. Unlike a hologram, which is a three-dimensional view of a scene, a volumetric display creates an actual scene that is comprised of millions and millions of tiny little points of light. Late one night in the shed, rather than using a piece of paper, we thought, let's create a moving surface that we can control. How about using a spinning helix? It would have a surface that would be controllable and move in a constant direction.
At that hour, the only thing we could find to carve into the shape of a helix was a sweet potato. So we put the sweet potato on the lathe, carved it into a helix, attached it to a drill and spun it up.
The helical sweet potato projection surface, or HSPPS for short, spun into motion, creating a blurry volume of root vegetable onto which was shown the pulsing laser. Again, the voxels, they appeared, but this time, when we used the drill, we could control the precise speed of the surface, and hence we could make the voxels actually stop. We could control the position of a voxel in space.
The quest for more voxels continued. We bought a lot of 5 old projectors from eBay for $150. They were cheap because they didn't have any bulbs, but we didn't care. We were using a laser.
We fired a laser into the projector and turned it on, and nothing happened. After a short investigation, we discovered that the projector manufacturers use special electronic circuits to disable the projector should you try to use your own cheap LED bulbs. It's a trick that they want to make you buy the very expensive bulbs. This was really, really annoying and disappointing to us.
We were utterly stumped. Our collective knowledge of hacking electronics came from what we'd seen on MacGyver.
And then we thought, how intelligent can a projector really be? Maybe we could trick it. Why not put a pretend bulb in the projector?
So we jammed a really big resistor into the projector bulb, turned it on, and to our amazement it worked for about 5 seconds before the resistor glowed white hot, caught on fire and melted a hole through the projector. Never mind, we had 4 more projectors. So what we needed was a bigger resistor. There are large water-cooled resistors that would do the job, but they were really expensive.
So we decided to have a break and have a think about it, and we went and have a cup of coffee in the kitchen. We were standing there looking at the kettle thinking, large water-cooled resistor, where could we get a large water-cooled resistor? And then it dawned on us, the kettle was a very large water-cooled resistor.
So we stripped down the wires of the kettle and plugged it into the projector. We weren't sure if putting 2,000 volts through a kettle was a good idea, so we turned it on with a stick. And to our amazement, it worked.
We bypassed the electrical control circuits of a projector using a kettle. We were very confident that's the first time anyone had achieved that.
It was time to put our new laser projector and shine it onto the helix. But unfortunately, our helix had gone mouldy. We needed a new helix.
Yeah, we needed a new helix, and the following week I came to the shed and Will had built a new helix. It was a very large helix. It looked like the propeller from a nuclear submarine. I tactfully explained to Will that spinning this helix would not only be physically difficult, it would be absolutely downright dangerous, and persuaded him we needed a smaller helix.
So what we needed was a CNC machine, a computer-controlled woodworking router to make a nice, precise helix. They were really expensive, so we bought an old embroidery machine and hacked it together and turned it into a CNC machine. And with it, we built this, our first precise helix.
We then built a vacuum forming machine and turned the wooden helix into a plastic helix because it would be much easier to spin.
At last, everything was ready. We plugged in the kettle into the projector, turned on the laser, spun up the helix, and hit the power button with a stick.
And amazingly, it looked absolutely terrible. The green light was out of focus and blurry. It looked like a kind of out-of-control dead glowworm just stuck to the helix. It was pathetic. We were really dismayed and disappointed, and we downed tools. We were fed up. Dust and cobwebs settled on all this equipment that we spent so much time making.
And then one day we realised that while we were doing this whole thing is because it was fun. We were hanging out in our sheds making stuff, solving some really complex problems. So we decided to resume our research.
We thought of some interesting uses for volumetric displays. We started to visualise what could be possible with such things. What would look cool floating in thin air, viewable from any direction. By now we had a clear vision of what we wanted to create, and we were determined.
So we spent 2 years working at our day jobs during the day and hacking away in the sheds late into the night. We were melting our brains with helical slicing algorithms and synchronization electronics until finally we achieved these, our first ever visions of a detailed volumetric display. It was at this point that we discovered the true magic behind volumetric displays. The reinvention of a shared social experience that happens around a physical object. It's a bit like the primeval magic that happens when you gather around a campfire. It's that sort of a shared social experience that's totally lost when you all sit side by side staring at a screen.
The little apparitions were utterly mesmerizing, and we sat and stared at them for hours and hours and hours. We called them apparitions. They were real, unlike an image on a screen. These were actually little models of things built using millions and millions of points of light. And then just when everything was coming together, something really bad happened. We discovered an image on the internet. It bore a striking resemblance to ours. This was another creation built by a New York startup called Voxiebox. They had built a display that had a striking resemblance to ours, and they were about to launch a Kickstarter. We were about to get beaten in a race that we didn't even know we were running. Voxiebox had appeared out of nowhere, and we were about to steal our thunder.
Our devastation turned to determination. We'd beat them to it. We'd launch before them. We had an absolutely mad scramble and launched a crowdfunding campaign. We had lots of really great feedback and were amazed by how much people were willing to reach out and help us. It was really, really exciting, at least for a while. The fundraising campaign failed. We only achieved about 10% of what we needed. Our prototype was just that. It was a prototype. It wasn't a product. It wasn't ready to sell. We jumped the gun in our rush to beat Vox onto market. It was game over.
Game over. So we downed tools and we just got a bit fed up. And about a month later, something really amazing happened. We received this message on Facebook from Sean of Voxiebox. They'd seen what we'd made in our sheds and they were really impressed. They wanted to join forces. They were just as crazy and as excited as we were. This was absolutely awesome.
After a whirlwind of legal activity and all that sort of stuff, a new Voxiebox was formed. We went into overdrive. The momentum just started to build. Each night while Gavin and I slept, they were solving technical problems, coming up with new designs, and networking with the most amazing people. And then while they slept, we were coding away, writing software and solving even more problems. The progress in this we have made in this short period of time has been nothing less than amazing. We discovered the Adelaide Fab Lab. Finally, we had access to the precise machining equipment that we needed. It wasn't just the 3D printers and laser cutter and all the tools at the Fab Lab that made it awesome. It was the network of people and the community around it. Our prototypes rapidly changed from stuff we'd hacked together in the shed to using the best bits of each design.
Our weekly team meetings are unconventional. That's us in our sheds, Sean in his bedroom, David in his study, and Alan in his car using the Wi-Fi in the Dunkin' Donuts car park. Our displays come a long way. We've played volumetric chess using gesture recognition. We've created content, and we've started engaging with some really, really talented people. Joseph White, creator of the widely acclaimed game Voxitron, is now helping us convert his game to run on our Voxiebox.
We've also welcomed a new member to the team, Ken Silverman. Ken is a pioneer in 3D graphics, and he wrote the graphics engine behind the original Duke Nukem game. Together, we've written a new graphics engine for the Voxiebox over the last few weeks, and over the last few months, with all of our powers combined, we have solved all of the big problems that have been bugging us for years.
Disruptive technologies, it's a phrase you might have heard recently. A disruptive technology is a technology that comes along that has the power to displace an existing technology. Here are some here. Bendy screens, fully immersive virtual reality, cameras that can record depth as well as images, and gesture recognition devices. It's a really, really exciting time we live in just now. The technological advances are absolutely mind-boggling.
We believe that the volumetric displays have got the potential to cause some pretty big disruption themselves.
We've got a mock-up of our Voxiebox here, under here, which we were going to show you, but we thought it might be better for you to look at this afternoon. We're going to start it up just for a few seconds here.
The dreaded technical demonstration.
It might not be easy to see from this point, but hopefully we'll be able to gather around it later on. Before we go, we've one last thing we'd really like to say. We'd like to thank everyone who's helped us along the way. It's been really wonderful. But most importantly, our fantastic wives for their support. It's been a very busy 5 years. We started with a vision. Stop there. Okay, we started with a vision from Star Wars, and we'd like to end with a quote. May the 4th be with you.
Please cover it back up again.